All right. Hello. Welcome to the LA Divorce Realtor show. I'm David Hitt, and today we're here with our fantastic divorce lender, Randy Diprima from CSMC Mortgage. Welcome, Randy.
Thank you.
And we're also here with James Ebert, appraiser, seasoned appraiser that's experienced in working with people in transition such as divorce. Welcome, James.
Well, hello.
Thanks for being here. Great. So what I want to talk about and limit our chat to about no more than 30 minutes, but what we want to kind of touch on today is when someone's considering going through a divorce, what are the things that they need to think of in order to prepare for the divorce, particularly if they own real estate? So, Randy, so the first few questions for you are, what does somebody need to know, and why should you be one of the first people that they contact?
Thank you, David. I absolutely believe a lender should be one of the first people. Besides a realtor, the lender should be one of the first people you contact, especially if one or both parties, you first have to be on the same page, right? We both have to agree that we're going to work together. One wants a buyout, one wants to sell, they both want to sell. And how do we do that? How do we accomplish that? Do we refinance? Do we pull out cash to pay off the other? How does the other one buy? There's so many questions. The problem is when they consult an attorney first, it's all hats are off, because then it's all convoluted, in my opinion. The attorneys want you to do things their way, and once you file, it's over. You're not going to be able to do anything. Once that filing is out there, you're not going to refinance, you're not going to buy out the other, you're going to buy the asset and sell the property, and it's tough even once it happens to go refinance, because the lenders, until it's final, the lenders don't know what the final dissolution is going to be. So you can file one way, and until it's final, we don't know what the ultimate decision is going to be and what the debt's going to be. So it's so important that, number one, you're on the same page with each other. Number two, you've consulted a realtor. And number three, you've consulted a lender. How do we accomplish what we want to accomplish? Then we can move on to a mediator or an attorney.
Okay, so my understanding was when I got my divorce real estate designation, that exactly what you said, they should get with a real estate agent and a mortgage lender to assess what their refinancing power is and what they're buying, refinancing, buying out one of the other spouses. And
or
then,
if they sell, how do they both go buy something, right?
Right. And if one keeps the house, the outspouse, the person that would be moving, see what they can purchase as a replacement property.
Correct.
So,
yes.
because the priority here, I believe, is we want to preserve the credit scores of the individuals and preserve homeowner eligibility. And what we're talking about, in my opinion, is consumer protection. So yes. I think what you said, once they do file for divorce, it changes things, since the train has left the station, in a Correct. Way of speaking.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah, and you're correct in that, is that besides contacting and doing that, you do have to do exactly what you just said, David. Protect your credit and preservation for purchasing down the road. So yeah, you're absolutely correct.
Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about, how does the process really work? I mean, can you go into that for me?
The process in regards to?
Who's buying, if one spouse
Right.
is buying out
Sure.
the other, do they both need to be on the loan?
Sure.
What if they
Good point.
purchasing separately.
Yep.
Can you
So
tell us how that works?
it depends on how they qualify. So does one qualify on their own to refinance, cash out, buy out the other? Do they have to qualify together, meaning they're both going to be on that loan, right, to get that cash out? So there has to be some conversations up front about how that's going to work. Sure, your divorce decree will give that home, and the judge will order that home, give it to somebody, and we don't have to count it. But if that person's on that loan together and the other person goes bad, both credits going to be screwed up, right? They're both going to be impacted by it. So there's a lot of choices that have to be made. How do we do this? Do we do a reverse mortgage, a forward mortgage? Do we both have to go on the loan together? Can one do it on their own? If I do it together, what happens if the other one goes bad? So a lot of things that have to be thought about.
Can you be a little more clarify? What did you mean by what if the other one goes bad? What did you mean by that?
Okay, so
please?
let's say that we needed both incomes to qualify to pull cash out to buy out the other. So escrow is told, when we close this refi, you give $100,000 to my spouse. They'll quit claim off. I'll be the only one on title, but we're both on the loan. So what happens if the person that's supposed to make the payments doesn't make them? What happens to the other one's credit? It's damaged, right? So now you're divorced, and yet your credit's being damaged because it's a credit score society today. Old days, we could say, okay, we understand, divorce decree, judge gave you that house, okay, well, we won't hold it against you. That was manual underwrites. Today it's automated. So today, if you're on that loan together and he or she doesn't make the payment, your credit's impacted. And that affects your whole life, right? So that's a major concern you have to think about.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I also, what I probably should have said at the beginning was that realtors are not qualified to give legal or tax advice, that we definitely suggest that you speak with a professional attorney and a CPA for professional guidance in those areas as well.
Yep.
So I need to make that disclaimer to
and a lot of attorneys, David, are not going to want you to do what I just said. But sometimes there's no other avenue, right? So a lot of attorneys will say, no, here's the downfall. You're going on the loan with soon to be your ex-husband or ex-wife. Do you trust he or she's going to make the payment? But if that's the only solution, we have to discuss that as opposed to selling the asset and splitting it up.
Okay, so. Great. Thank you for that. Now, this third point I have, and forgive me, a completely separate reverse mortgage. Do we need both? Okay, we just touched on that. If they decide they need to sell and split the equity of the house, Randy, how do they move forward to purchase their own homes if that's their desire?
That's a good question. So it's easy if one qualifies on their own. And I hate to be chauvinist, but typically it's the man has that bigger income, right? It could be a woman too. So whoever has a bigger income can afford to do that on their own normally, right? They can scale down, they can buy whatever they need to buy. How about the other party that has been a house husband, housewife for all these years? What are they going to do? So that's when reverse mortgage may come into play. They're on Social Security, right? They've been living together for so many years. So he or she can still buy with a reverse mortgage and not have to make any payments, as long as we have that equity going forward. So there are other ways to do things out there. And I think that's what's the critical point of this whole thing is how do they move forward in their lives and still want that lifestyle they're accustomed to?
Mm-hmm. That's very, very, very true. Now, I think it also depends on what each of the spouse's goals are and determining what those are together, if possible, and how do we accomplish those. that's
And so,
how part
right.
of this gathering together to properly prepare to go down this uncertain road of divorce. Would you agree, Randy?
I agree. And
They have to be.
all this is based upon doing this before divorce. After the divorce is a different situation. We're going to look at child support. As long as it's going to continue for 3 years, we'll use that income. So a spouse that's going to get child support or alimony, we'll look at that income, but we're also going to want to see it's being paid. So that's a whole nother situation after the fact, post-divorce, right? So we're, in this conversation, we're talking about pre-divorce and preparation. I think there's
Yes.
another conversation to have post-divorce. And how do we qualify? What do we do?
Yes, most definitely. And I think, reiterating here that, they both have to be on the same page.
Important.
And upfront. Now, the last point, one of the final points I have is, what if there's a dispute of value? Typically, I believe you had said, Randy, that they'll get 2 appraisals.
Right.
Let's ask James, our expert seasoned appraiser. Can you share with us, James, about that and what that process looks like, please?
Where'd he go?
Unmute.
There we go. You're off mute
Certainly.
now.
Right.
Thank
Happy
you.
to help give a little bit of insight into the process. The first reaction, of course, is let's each get our own appraiser and let's make sure that we're looking out for our own interests. And we want, one side will probably want it to be high and one side will want it to be low. But what this does is this puts you into a cauldron of dispute. And all this does is feed the fees of the appraisers, the multiple appraisers, and the attorneys to fight over where the real value is. I think it's really much more beneficial if at the outset you can say, let's hire a high qualified appraiser at the beginning, just one, and let's see what he comes up with. And let's take a look at the numbers that he comes up with and see if we can agree that that's a fair number that we can move forward. What this does, this allows you to save time and money, because you're not paying for the attorneys on their multi-$100 per hour fee, disputing, going back and forth, arguing over things. You're moving on to the next phase of your family's process. And the second thing is that it allows you to sort of come together and sort of mend some of the disputes that you're going to have and move forward to the next level. So you can just sort of say, let's accept this appraiser, let's accept this value. We get to move forward much more quickly in solving our whole situation. There's a lot less animosity involved in every little aspect of it. And hopefully it allows people to start to heal faster. So even though it may sound like it's a very expensive proposition to hire the highest qualified appraiser, the fact is that a couple $100 difference is not going to be very great when you consider the difference could be $10,000 between 2 different appraisers who are basically on an agenda to either come high or come low. So hopefully, I would say, find somebody who is qualified that is in many cases either IRS certified or that's familiar with courtroom settings. So they're familiar with the legal process and they're not afraid of it as they move forward. Like in our office, we always try to say, well, we write everything for the judge. If the judge never sees it, that's fine. But if it does end up in court, we can look at the judge, we can look at the jury, we can say, this is truly the best number that we could find based on the market data. So hopefully that allows people to move forward quickly.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Now, James, what does someone need to look for when hiring an appraiser for such a situation like this, such as divorce?
It's probably most important to find somebody who's qualified to work in that neighborhood. So I suggest you look in, say, go to Google and type in appraiser and the zip code that you're in, or the city or the community that you're in, and start picking up the thread from there. The second part that you could do is talk to a realtor and ask him for some names of some appraisers that he knows of in the area that's familiar with homes, like if he's familiar with luxury homes, or he's familiar with beachfront homes, or if he does a lot of condominiums, so he's able to have an authority with that type of product. So those are the two steps I would say try to take.
And then I think you also said, ask them for, what their experience is. If they have experience working in divorce or courtroom type settings or situations as well. That sounds like you kind of commented on they can't be afraid of being in that sandbox, if you would.
Right. There's a lot of appraisers who are very used to just going out and doing their little valuation for the bank, submitting it, and they go back to their office, and they really don't want to be held under scrutiny live. They don't like working in the world of legal situations. And so that's not going to be a good person who's going to prepare a document that's going to be supportable all the way down the line. There's a lot of other, go ahead.
I think that's I think that's actually a very important point, that what you just talked about, the being comfortable in the courtroom, and also knowing the area, making sure that the person knows the area. Those are two really important things, I think, to find out as well. James, is there anything else that people should know with reference to appraisals and divorce?
I think it's worthwhile to recognize that each side has their, what I call the fiduciary responsibility to look out for their own interests. So if one side wants to buy out the house, of course, they're going to want it to be slightly lower. If one side wants to be bought out, they are going to want it to be slightly higher.
In the old days, we could pick and choose an appraiser based upon what value we wanted, right? That's changed today. You're absolutely correct. Right?
That's the way it used to. You used to cherry pick the people that you wanted, that you knew so-and-so tends to be lowball, so-and-so
Right.
tends to be optimistic.
Right.
And when I hear people that say, well, I'm trying to get bought out by my ex, my future ex, and so I'd like it to be as strong a value as possible. To
Right.
which I just basically say, duly noted.
Exactly.
And we don't try to bring it up again, but the point is that I know that my role in this process is to provide the very best service that I can. And I look at it as a family unit that's going through a change, and it doesn't, in most cases, it's not going to be of any value for me to be overly optimistic or overly pessimistic on the value.
Right.
That I really, 9 times out of 10 or 20 times out of 21 probably, it's going to really help everybody more if I'm just hewing right to what the market value says.
Right.
Right. And I think, we the three of us are also members of Divorce Transition Professionals. And what I love about the organization's motto is making divorce just a little easier. And I think that's exactly what we're talking about here, in my opinion, because it can be such a stressful time and an uncertain time. I think one of the most disastrous, and for lack of a better word, in someone's lives that may be is equal to a death. So I think it's what I like about being a member of the group and doing business with professionals like yourself is that we all have that point of view, that we want to do what we can, bring value, and ease the stress on each of these divorcing individuals. Is there anything else, Randy, with respect to loans or what we discussed early on in this interview?
I think you pretty well covered it for today, David. I think you've talked about how important it is to reach out to your realtor and lender first and foremost before that filing occurs. be on the same page with each other, get a fair value appraisal, right? An independent person. So I think for this topic that you've done today, you've hit a lot of good bullet points.
All right, great, you guys. And of course, I don't know if now I probably can do another video on choosing their realtor because at times they want to each have their own person that they like, and how do you? My suggestion is always with regard to that is to find a third person that neither of you are familiar with. Get a relationship with somebody that can come in and be impartial and unbiased.
You're right. You're right.
Yeah, that's the other last part of this. Well, James, any last thoughts with reference to any of this topic today?
No, I think you've covered all the major points, and open up the forum for people who are going through this to be able to then build their own questions to get some answers as well.
Yeah, and I think, the last thought that I, will put out before we, close is that not every situation is going to, every situation is going to be different.
Yep.
So the dynamics of your particular situation may be very different than what any of this that we've discussed today, or the options or directions that you go within. But this is just generally an overall conversation of these things, because I think that there's so many questions and uncertainty for people and fear going through this process, and 50 to 60% of marriages, I think the statistic is now, end up in divorce. So particularly with COVID, I think that rate has increased drastically with how many divorces we'll see. And I think it's important. It's important for me, and I believe it is for you guys to, be the helping hand out there and try to, educate and guide as much as possible through a tumultuous time in someone's lives. And I love and appreciate you both. And I appreciate you getting on here with me today and doing the interview. Have a great day, you guys. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, James. Thanks, Randy.
Thank
Bye,
you.
David.
Bye-bye for now.